Hi and welcome to Annoyed Kitten and this week's Drachenwald Files, Fika with your fellow Drachenwalder. And today we say, hi Antonio!
Hi, buongiorno.
Please introduce yourself with the correct title and your full name.
Sure. It's Hey You Antonio. I'm Baron Antonio di Rienzo, Ruspoli, companion of the Order of the Dragon Steel, etc., and currently on vigil for Mastery of Defense.
Yes, which has also been called the longest vigil ever.
Well, vigils are when you pray and purify yourself and get yourself spiritually ready for your new role. So I think it's probably some form of divine sign.
So, let's start with the first question, which is how did you end up in this society, and what is your first memory that you have? Like, this is the time when you got hooked.
Um, well, if we go right back to 1990, when I started university, I went to the fencing club because I'd always fancied giving it a go. And I got reasonably good. I was a foilist and very aggressive. And then suddenly I reached the point where we did a technique where you flick the foil round, and because it's all electrically scored, you can actually get it to trigger on the back in a way that has no resemblance to anything. And I looked at that and the modern right away rule, which is where if you both attack, the guy whose arm straightened first wins, and the other guy's point doesn't count at all. I just thought, well, hang on, what's this supposed to be? I mean, there are very good reasons for right of way that are interesting in and of themselves from the 17th and 18th centuries. But it just struck me, well, hang on, what is this? And I got a bit disillusioned by it and dropped out of fencing. And some years later, I shared a flat with a fellow Scadian, or several, and they would go out to Shire feasts and revels, but there wasn't really anything in it for me. Then after I'd graduated and I'd moved back to Scotland where they were, they said, well, hang on, you do know there's fencing in the SCA as well, don't you? And I went, no, I didn't. So Claire, Kit, and I went up to Edsall Castle, which is halfway between Dundee and Aberdeen, and I was lent some fencing stuff, and it was a rainy castle, but I had a great fun couple of hours brawling in the vaulted cellars, and I was hooked. And our next event that we went to was at the opposite end of England, a month or two later, for one of the academies of defence. And that's me since.
So, fencing got you into this.
Yeah.
Fencing is what kept you, I guess.
Mostly. I'm trying to be more of an all-rounder. So I was very involved in the Chirurgeonate when it still existed. And, you know, if you ever want me to talk solidly for an hour, at some point, get me drunk and ask me why it was a good idea that the Kyrgyzstan was shut. And I will spend a long time telling you why it wasn't. So there's that. But it's also quite a good area for exploration of other things that are quite interesting. So because, as a fencer, my persona is 16th century. You don't have to be, but 90% of fencers tend to be. That's jumped me off onto a lot of other 16th century things, specifically the elephant in the room, which is the Reformation. And I've always been interested in ships, and the Mary Rose is the classic 16th century example. So those are my main interests now as well.
Because we did get some questions from other people than me this time. And one of them is, what craft have you never tested but would love to learn?
Oh, golly. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I think I've tried most of the things I want to try. I've even strapped myself into heavy gear and been beaten up, which was interesting. I do a lot of archery. I'd like to try horseback archery, actually. That's probably my best answer, as it's a sort of connection of two other things that I do.
Yes, because you happen to have horses of your own.
Yes, although currently only one of them is rideable. Still have a sore hoof, so.
Oh, poor guy. But horseback archery, yeah, that it is cool. It's really cool when you look at it. So that's a good answer. We have some other questions. This is a this is a strange one. If you get magic powers and you can take that magic power into our society, what power would you choose?
Oh, golly. Yeah, that is a very good question. I think, however tempting it is to do a little bit of Professor Xy reprogramming of people who are being silly and or objectionable, I don't think I can ethically support that. So I think I'd like to go for healing powers, so we don't have any more of those raglans.
Yeah. Well, people tend to get hurt when they climb around on high stuff.
Or in my case, just walk down a perfectly straight path.
Yeah, that happened too. That happened too. Healing powers are good.
Yep.
Next question is this is less silly. What would you like to see more of during events? And now we can speak, of course, both about online events, because now we have started to have those, and or in real life events.
I think, well, several things. I'd like to see more period gaming done. I'm a huge backgammon fan, and all the related games, but it's interesting, I think, to immerse yourself in elements of what was done. On a more society level, I would like to see more cross-pollination. We're quite, I don't want to use the word cliquey, but quite narrowed into streams. So armored, rapier, archery, various forms of arts and sciences, service, and so on. I think you can learn a lot from other disciplines. I've seen period moves used exactly the same with rattan as I have with steel, and yet there isn't the level of communication between the two physical combat disciplines that I would like to see. So I'd like more normalization of that.
Yeah, I see what you get. I think that we tend to, now we are doing this and then we are doing that, and people can go between those, but you tend to not
Yeah.
mix. I think as I understand what you mean about cross pollination, that we perhaps should do something more um, at the same time instead of just now we do this and now we do that.
Yeah, but also you by mixing groups. I went to classes at Kingdom University Online that I wouldn't normally have gone to. I'm thinking particularly of the Roman perfumes class, which had some fascinating suggestions about cosmetics, which then tie into period medicine, and also mentioned a Roman shipwreck that I'd never heard of. And you learn things from other areas of specialty that you can then potentially apply to your own interests. And I worry if we get too narrow, that we're not being, well, good Renaissance gentle people, for one thing.
Basically, it's like the more you listen to other stuff, the more you know, understand about your stuff. It's
Mm,
very
yeah,
simply put, like a 5 year old, because words are not happening today. Uh,
migraine or
but yes, to put it very, very simple.
and that's also kind of what got me into the theology side of things. Because by the time Antonio is kicking around in the 1580s, the Reformation has been going for 60 years, and like it or not, that is an epoch shaping event, and your persona would have had a position on it, and that then, looking into that, then led me down a whole series of fascinating rabbit holes.
Oh, those rabbit holes.
Mm.
I'm in a couple of rabbit holes right now, mostly due to Kingdom Universities, and
Mm.
it's fun, but it also takes a lot of time.
Yes, yes, it does.
So crawling down to one of those rabbit holes that you might be in now, speaking more about your upcoming vigil.
Yes,
So you are, let's see, it was during this summer that
virtual Raglan.
yeah, virtual Raglan. So in July, and do you have any plans right now, or is it just like we have to wait until this shitty pandemic is over?
Um, yes, I do have plans. I think there's two basic ways to look at events. Mistress Leonette is quite influential in my thinking here, as either acknowledgement or transformative. And I've read some rough details of the approach the early Jesuits took, which was very informed by 16th century Spanish chivalric approaches, but applied to the church, which is an interesting thing. So praying before their swords, dedicating their swords to a higher purpose. And that seemed kind of appropriate. I'm struggling to find primary sources, though, and I have to admit I've rather given up on that and asked Leonette very nicely if she could find something. We'll see if anything turns up. So I'm going to be looking at very simple food and drink for me, and very rich and extravagant for everybody else. So it's about self-denial and contemplation.
I so hope that it will be some time where I can attend, um, because, well, I like you, and I think this is you. You are so worthy of this. I know how hard you have worked for this, and so on. But I'm not gonna make you embarrassed now. I'm gonna make you cry
Too
later.
late. Too late.
I
Yeah.
know you're. Uh, Skorpan, please. He's being a little bit of an obnoxious guy right now. He's my pirate cat.
Well, it suits you. It's a good look.
It's a good look. I mean, it goes well with the Viking things.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyhow, so go back to you. I think what you said there about asking the net, I think that is one of the really good things in our society, that we try and then we realize this is just not happening, and
Yeah.
we can actually ask for help. As for a date and event, I guess we just have to wait.
Yes, I mean provisionally it's looking at Ireland in the spring, but goodness only knows whether
Yeah.
anything will be happening in person by then.
Well, we'll see. And speaking about the dreadful horrid pandemic, as we tend to do, because it kind of rules our life right now. Uh,
Yes, it does a bit.
well, especially for you, knowing what you do
Mm.
mundanely. How have you handled the pandemic? Speaking about the society now, not so much your personal life, but how have you handled the society during the pandemic?
It's been difficult actually. With the two main things I do, being fencing and archery. The archery club that has had me on hold for a long time, because they're busy with their mundane lives, has been shut down anyway, and fencing hasn't really been happening either. So I've done some reading. I've done some thinking about adjustments to my technique. So I've done a lot of plotting, but how that will actually turn out against somebody else's blade, I just don't know. And that's getting slightly to the frustrating point. But drills are good for me, and yeah, we'll see.
And you have participated in Virtual Raglan, and I know you participated in Kingdom University.
Oh yes, I mean, again, arts and sciences are vitally important to the society. Um, it's one of the big pros. We could just be something like the Armored Combat League, or another HEMA club, but we're not. We're very much about putting it into its context. And I think to some degree, some arts and science involvement is vital for everyone. So for Kit, it's the cooking and the embroidery and the gold work and things. For me, I'm far less hands-on crafty than she is. I've done a bit of sugar work, I've done a bit of mayolica, but a lot of it is about knowing stuff. So at some point, I will probably be dipping back into the surgeon's kit of the Mary Rose for another class, I think.
I I am a little bit sad I missed that one during Kingdom University. I have also a fascination for old ships and seafaring. I don't know if it is my Viking roots. I don't have any Viking roots, but anyhow, I am I am interested in that.
Well, watch this space, because although unfortunately the recording of Kingdom University, my class failed, I am going to be redoing that class for the Myneth Gwyn Learned Discourses, which will also be recorded. So hopefully we can then catch it up for Kingdom University.
I mean, for me, it's um, as much as I miss people, because I do, I miss people like crazy right now. I can't wait to just sit next to a fire with a nice cup of cider in my hand, and just be with people. I do actually like the online part too.
Yes, I mean, it's different.
It
And there's things that you wish you could do that you just can't. My previous university classes have been tending towards the period combat technique stuff. And as much as I would like to have everybody line up with their Zoom and a pole or a sword, it's just not viable.
no,
So you've got to work within the limits of the technology.
yeah. But for me, and that was what I'm going to ask you. For me, the online has been a new thing, but a good complement to which I wish we continue. What do you think that we will or should take with us when this pandemic is over?
Um, I think the broader A&S meetings, lectures, classes, whatever you want to call them, are a definite win from the pandemic. I don't see why they can't continue. And I think it's also worth thinking, time zones allowing, that it allows us to link up as part of a broader society.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just Antonio talking to some people in a village hall in the northeast of England. It's Antonio talking to somebody in Finland, and somebody in Scotland, and somebody in Sweden, and somebody at midnight in the States. And I think that is a great step for the society. We just need to work out how to keep it going.
How do we keep it going?
Um, well, I think part of the problem is, again, that compartmentalization. So I think we have to get used to saying, well, look, these classes are being run by, well, say Myneth Gwyn, every Tuesday evening, or every second, or every fourth, depending on what it ends up being. And here's the next 3 months of titles, and then spread that information wide, because I may not think my class is going to interest a lot of people, but it may be that someone in, say, Ontia or the West or Callantir was just wondering about the Skudlev Viking ship, and therefore the class pitches up at the right moment. And under normal circumstances we would completely miss one another, But if pitching up to hear me talk about it as part of a general thing, then links them to sources that allows them to dig further for themselves, and then do a class which inspires, say, Countess Agnes in Sweden with more information about Viking seafaring, which to me is a peripheral area. But I think that's marvelous. The spreading of information is a good thing.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Listening to you, I'm just thinking that, yeah, if I hold my class at a Drachenwald event, a normal event,
Mm.
I might have somewhere between 0 to 5 people listening.
Yeah.
If because we tend to have very narrow little
Yeah.
subjects. We are nerds. We are geeks. We like to dive in this very little narrow path,
Yeah.
And that might be, there are always other people interested in the same thing, but, or like you say, like at least in the same kind of area.
Yeah.
But instead of having me sitting in a classroom in Nordmark with like 2 or 3 people listening to me, I suddenly I'm online and I have 30, 40 people listening to me. That is from the whole globe.
Yeah.
I think that was, for me, it was very nervous to do that. How did it feel for you to be on an event and holding a lecture where you know that you have
Well,
so many
firstly,
people?
I very carefully didn't pay any attention to how many people I had listening. So that was one thing. And secondly, they put me on at 8 a.m. local time start for my class.
Oh, right, you
And
were the early
I,
bird.
I am not a natural morning person. So to a certain extent, there was this sort of shambling heap of 16th century noblemen talking about ships without any wider awareness of the outside world.
I find it most hard that normal, if you hold a lecture, you get responses, right?
Yeah,
You can see the faces of people and you can get the responses, and usually people give you some feedback, not by words
yeah,
necessarily, but some kind. And here it was like talking into a
the
void.
void. Yeah, I mean, I very carefully broke mine up with some, well, what do you think? Questions to the audience. Um, but it was a lot harder than a face-to-face audience would have been to do the same thing to. So it was a lot harder work, but you've got to balance that against, firstly, the breadth, the number of people you can get to,
Mm.
and secondly, giving that class in person would not have been able to use as many pictures.
No.
Um, I wouldn't have found it as easy to list my sources. So it's almost a sort of hybrid between how you would normally give a class and a more academic presentation. So
Okay. Um, just one moment. I have a very whiny cat that thinks it's his time to get treats because I interrupted his sleep. I'm just gonna continue the interview. Where were we? We were speaking about holding classes online and
hybridization between a more
exactly.
academic approach and how you would normally do things.
Yeah. So, jumping off to some of the silly questions that people have wanted me to ask you, um, we have a little fun thing here. If you were a drink, Which one would you be and why?
Well, I think quite clearly it would need to be a short. Um, I think it will. Let's go with one of my favourite single malt whiskies. Then we'll go with Edredauer, which is not my normal taste at all. I tend to like the big, robust malts like Lagavulin or Lafroig. But let's face it, I don't have a big, robust body. But I'm more characterful with a hopefully pleasing, sweet edge. So let's call it Edredauer. And the people who don't agree with that will say I'm best kept in an airtight cask for 10 years.
Okay. Well, no. I think Antonio is best when he sits somewhere on Raglan. It's a little bit dark, and we are chit chatting about basically anything on earth.
Yeah, that is a whole lot of fun,
It is.
particularly if well, Mistress Cat, Viscountess Cat, has left her tea making boiler readily to hand.
Well, we do. I think both of us are hobbits at heart.
Yes, yes.
We are short and sturdy, and we love food and drinks, and basically just coziness.
Yes, and merry times.
Merry times, yes, merry times. And well, I do have one last question for you before we end this merry time.
Okay.
What was your last magical moment in the SCA?
Oh, well, I think my last magical one was being called to vigil. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Um, was it the most atmospheric of ways? No, not really. Um, if we're going in person, I think fighting Mistress Lynette on the bridge at Raglan Castle in, well, a light rainstorm, but steel cut and thrust on the bridge. I think another one to go in there's rather longer ago, but it was when Queen Topher of blessed memory called me to the Queen's Order of Courtesy, which totally stunned me, and that was one of the wonderful reigns I've served to. So there's so many, but the most recent is calling to vigil.
Because we do have a lot of those magical moments in the
Oh
SCA.
yeah.
And I can't wait to have those with you again. I hope that we meet very soon again. But
Yeah.
for now, I do not have any more questions for you. So normally I say, do you have something that you think I have forgotten to ask you? I'm not sure I want to ask you that question because then we will never get out of here. I know us. I know us. We can stay on topic for hours. So
Yeah. I've got a question for you.
okay.
If not Viking, then when?
If not Viking, then when? I would say probably mid 16th century Italian.
Oh yes, we have chocolate.
Yeah, and that is because first of all, I do have actually garb that is from that era. I do know that I fit in that garb, and well, perhaps not longer. It's like this COVID thing. So, anyhow, but I just love the clothes. They are so beautiful, and um, all the pearls, all the bling.
Yes, I mean, I find it very amusing, um, the ladies sort of struggling out of their Elizabethans and into mundane clothes. And I'm there and I take off a shirt and some long shorts and put on a shirt and some long shorts, um, and travel home from the event in pretty much the same thing as I've been wearing all event, but modern.
And that's why I have gone back to Viking,
Mm,
because it's comfy. I
yeah.
don't have to wear 5 layers of stuff if I don't
Mm,
want to. I easily get hot. So with Viking, I don't have to put on several layers to
mm,
actually be period. I can just have a shirt and a
mm,
dress, or a tunic.
mm,
Um,
mm,
it's for me, it's more comfy, it's more easy, and I can run around in it, in a way I
mm.
do not do when I wear my Italian garb, which is a
Yeah.
shirt, corset,
Oh, yeah.
dress, overdress, belt, and a ton of jewelry. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I do look like a fabulous Christmas tree when I'm walking there.
Oh, you look magnificent.
I do look like a fab Christmas tree. That's my statement. Um, and I love it. But it's not
Practical,
the
it's
kind of
not.
garb that you kind of
Yeah.
move
Mm,
around in the same
yeah.
way as you do in Viking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why Kit took the other approach of dressing up in boys' clothing.
Yeah.
Um, Although I guess there's also the things coming out from the Tudor tailor on lower class clothing, which, perforce has to be slightly more user friendly. So,
Yeah. I mean, people have been working
mm,
I mean,
mm,
definitely both during Renaissance and in medieval times and Viking times. And I mean, there's always been a working class, and
mm,
they need to have clothes they can move in and actually function in. So
yeah,
there are options. It's just that those options sometimes are a little bit harder to find info about,
yeah,
because what we tend to save is the higher status
absolutely.
thing.
And that's always an interesting bias. You know, you see the same thing in Arms and Armour as well. Just because it's in the V&A or the Wallace collection doesn't mean that anybody actually ever used this. It may be that it's survived because it was too impractical ever to take out of the armory.
That is a very fair point, and I think that is something that we, as I said this in another interview, where as an ethnologist, we usually speak about the knowers and the doers. And previously, the knowers being mostly academic people that do
Mm,
the text work, the book work, and the doers are the ones that happily just try things. Later, during the later years, these two groups have started to merge together, and we suddenly
mm,
have a whole new idea about what actually was working and what actually people might have used, because
mm,
uh, the ones that actually are doing the living history will say, no, that
mm.
piece of garment does not work. So I think that is a very good point about our hobby.
Mm.
We tend to test out the theory,
Yeah, I mean,
the ideas.
the, back back when we started, we were using foils and epées for fencing. And there was a lot of discussion about the fact that if you use techniques from the period manuals, they don't work.
No.
These guys didn't know what they were talking about. Um, and I tried using small sword manuals, which is, it's a post-period technique, but it worked better with foil and epee because that it's closer to them. But what it means is if you are trying to use a simulator to do what a professional teacher said would work and it doesn't work, it means your simulator is wrong. It
Mm.
isn't the professional didn't know what he was talking about. And as we've moved to increasingly better simulators, first to the Schläger blades, the practice versions for the German collegiate fencing, and then to still better simulators, we've increasingly found that the period manuals are the place to be shown how to do things. Who'da thunk?
Well, back in the days, they were so stupid.
Yeah.
No, I think that is also a fun thing that people tend to not trust that
Mm.
people back then actually knew what they were talking about.
Doing. Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I think sometimes we put ourselves on a bit of a high horse and
Yeah.
think of ourselves a little bit smarter than people back then, and that is not always the truth. Sometimes, yes, but not always.
As a fun anecdote for you to edit in if you choose, we were flying back from an event in Germany, and I fly with the swords in a golf box because I like having swords that are still straight at the end of a trip. And we got to the booking, and the check-in lady said, doctor, you have enjoyed your golfing trip. And I went, well, they're not actually golf clubs, they're swords. And she didn't know the English for swords, and I couldn't remember the German for swords.
Oh.
So I said the only German word for sword I could remember, not Schwert, which is the one I should have used, but Schläger, which of course is associated with the eccentric habit of fencing with sharps to try and leave dueling scars. And she sort of goes, Schläger? And leans over the check-in desk to look at my cheeks and temples, first one side and then the other. And I somehow managed to keep a straight face while saying, oh, no, 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 I'm just extremely good at it.
Sometimes I want to do an episode where I have people just sending me in. Actually, I might actually ask people, please send me fun stories about SEA and being, in some kind of security airports.
Yeah.
All the things that these poor security people have to handle when it comes to SEA people: swords, helmets, crowns, people with
Yeah. I was
things.
made to put on my chainmail shirt that I wear as my undergarb armor when I'm fencing in Copenhagen airport, with them saying, "Are you a knight or something?" Or something.
Or something. Yeah, a night or something.
Mm.
So I think this is a good note to end this.
Absolutely, and to edit into your episode of no S, there I was.
Exactly. I mean, we do need a episode with no. There I was at this security at the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, people, please send stuff in to me. Um, you fooled me to speak 15 minutes more.
Absolutely, and I knew what I was doing.
Yes, you did. Antonio, thank you so much for doing this for me. I'm so happy to talk to you.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. And I will end this with saying cheers until we see each other next time.
Skål.